when I was in high school, I didn't date. Of course, I was just 14 when I went, and I didn't date until I was about 16. And I did have one or two that I dated, and one that was a real good friend, but I did have a couple of friends that was my Uncle Joe Costello's nieces, and they loved their cousin Reba, and they thought the best thing they could do was get us together. Well, we had a party at my aunt's and uncle's, and I agreed to have a date with him. And when he and his friend, who was my friend's date, came, the friend came in first. And I thought, I hope you're not the one. He was very handsome, but for some reason he just didn't appeal to me. Well, Reba walked through the door, and the doors were only 6 feet high. And he had to duck his head to get in the door. And when he did, I looked into the prettiest brown eyes I had ever seen. And as I've told the girls, I never got over it. But we didn't date very often for a long, long time. And then I started going with him to church at LaRue's. And still with the cousins who were friends of mine. And while I was back for my senior year of high school, I had finished all the things all the subjects I took, and I didn't know that shorthand wouldn't give me a full credit, only half. So I couldn't graduate in 3 years. But also they required 4 years of English, and I just didn't want to sit in the study hall all that time, even though we'd talked about getting married and I agreed, but we weren't going to do it for quite a while yet. Well, Dad planned my future for me to make me a teacher, which I didn't want to be. And I just decided I didn't want to sit in the study hall so much for a whole year. I wanted to go on to business school because that's what I wanted to do. And Dad didn't approve of that, of course. You know, school teaching was the only profession as far as he was concerned. And he was a good one. But anyway, I just asked Reba to come pick me up and take me back to my grandparents, and he did. But when I told him what happened, he said, "You're not going to just go down there and sit down in the country the rest of your life, are you?" And I said, "Well, no, if I can find a way to do what I want to do." And his aunt had asked him to come to Huntsville and work for them, help his uncle with, they had one of the most famous tourist courts in the country for its honesty, cleanliness, and all of that. And so he just thought that'd be wonderful. And I could still go to school and do what I wanted to do, but at the same time I could help her with the store, so. And we had it all very well planned, and we got married. And then his mother refused to even talk about our leaving. Said we were needed there. Well, anyway, as it turned out, we moved down to the farm, and we had a 3-room house with 1 porch.
In my memory, this is the back step of the house, at the back of the house right here. The back, and then the house was 2 rooms here, 2 rooms here, and a front porch. And the front porch actually came up to this area. The way I remember it, the front porch was here and the house here. This was in the corner, wasn't it, of the front porch in the house?
The front porch
Came out.
actually begun here and went out that way.
And the house came
And
back
then the
this way.
bedroom
Okay.
here. The porch, back porch was right there. And I had on a print dress the day before with a matching belt. And Reba got up, it wasn't good daylight, and he came and sat right there in the chair to put his shoes on. And he saw my belt over there, and he reached to pick it up, and it was a snake. The other thing is, when Irene and Joe lived in California, they came back, and they came by to see us. And they got there about midnight, which wasn't unusual. And we always had a fun time. Well, anyway, we got just about, I wasn't asleep, they may have been. Now, there was a path here between the porch and the water tower was on the other side of the windmill. I saw a shadow there. We had a smokehouse right there where we kept the cured meat. And I saw something, and I punched Reba. He and Joe were on a pallet down on the floor. Irene and I were on the bed. And he raised up, and I pointed. And he jumped up, and his shotgun was right inside the door there, and he just reached for it and punched Joe to go with him. A black man that lived over in the community way over there had come in there to steal meat. And they started after him, and Reba just shot up in the air. And down where the barn is down there it was sand from here to there. And next morning we went to look at his tracks. That man must have been flying. His tracks were so far apart. He dropped the meat. He didn't get there with it. We were only up here on weekends because we were working in Houston. But Reba was making a little more money than he had ever made before, and we decided to build this barn where we had wanted to build one. He'd cut logs to build one here years ago, but his dad didn't want it here, so we didn't build it. And so he wanted to build this barn right where he'd always wanted it. And he asked Olin's dad if he would build it, and he would. So he came up here, and they talked about how big and all that. And I know we came back on 2 weekends to see it in the process.
So it was probably in the 60s, somewhere along back there.
I can't remember if we built the barn first or the pond first, but there was a government program where they paid so much on doing the pond for stock water, and we intended to do it right over that hill over there, but the engineers said there was better. And so they came down and figured out how much and where, and we had that done when we were having the clearing down in the pasture. We were getting it ready for when we were retired. We were going to build a house right up there on that hill, and we even ordered the plans for it and talked about it for a couple of years. And then when we moved back, we didn't do that. We tore down the house and the roof somewhat. And Olin's dad did that too, and rebuilt it. When I first saw that farm, it didn't mean anything to me. We just passed by it and stopped and spoke to the people living there sometime. But when Reba and I were married on October the 11th, we went out there to live, just before Thanksgiving, and we had a small 3-room house there. Later we moved into the larger house, and each time I decorated it best I could with what we had, and we always made it feel like home. And even after we moved away years later, when we came back into the gate, we always felt like we were home again. Before he had passed away, he said, "When I'm gone, why don't you sell this farm? You'll get enough from it to live comfortably, maybe, the rest of your life." Well, that was not our plan. We'd planned to keep it for our children. And so when later on I thought about selling it, on one occasion I had an offer from a friend realtor, and as I thought about it, I thought, I can't do that without talking to the girls. And about that time, Marilyn Nolan called on the radio from Brazil, and they said, "You do whatever you need to do, whatever you want to do will be all right with us." I called Glenda a little later, and she said almost the same thing. And as we talked, she said, "Mother, you don't sound like you want to sell it." And I said, "I don't." She said, "Then don't do it. You don't have to." And later on, a good many years later, I would go down into the pasture and sit down on a log and think about the past and the good times we'd had there, also the difficult times, because farm life wasn't always easy. But at any rate, I was offered $1,200 an acre and promised perhaps 2 more. And as I thought about that, that would be a lot of money. I could be comfortable. But then I said to the realtor, "You can show it if you want to, but it will not be sold. I'm keeping it." And we did, and I'm so glad we did, because now I'm seeing my family enjoy it, even perhaps more than we did, because they're not working quite as hard as we had to work on the farm. The happiest days of our lives, I guess, was when our children were born and we started into the business of raising a family. Glenda came in 1936 and her sister Marilyn 2 years later. We had such a good time with the kids and other neighborhood children as well. I guess we enjoyed the farm so much that we never wanted to leave there, and wouldn't have had it not been the years that we did have to help the family because his dad was ill and couldn't do the store, so we helped with that. And I spent a year or so running that grocery store for his dad. And then his dad died, and we knew that we had to do something because his mother wouldn't stay alone, nor would she leave her home. So we went to LaRue to live for a while. And he had such an attack of some kind. We felt like it was a heart attack, and went to Jacksonville, where the Travises were well-known doctors, and found that he didn't have a heart attack. They had spinal arthritis, they said, and would probably be a wheelchair patient the rest of his life. So we moved. Went to work for friends of ours in Athens, and he'd been working for the health department, along with keeping the farm going. And the girls were growing up, and in fact, Glenda had already graduated and married, and then Marilyn graduated. And he was just getting worse and worse. He couldn't ride in the truck, so Reba had met some men that wanted him to come to work on the grounds and at A&M College Station, and we moved down there, and of course I had to have a job too, and just quickly found one at J.C. Penney's, which was near where we were staying. We were visiting with Glenda and Kenneth, and when I went out to look for a place to work, we'd applied several places, and I said, well, I guess we didn't go to Penny's, but there was a parking place right in front of the store, and she said it won't hurt to ask. So we went in, and I met the manager, and I didn't have to ask for a job. He was hunting someone for the department that took care of fabric and patterns and all of that sort of thing. And he said, when I talked to him about it and said, you know, I haven't done this before. And he said, I just guess you made that dress you're wearing. And I said, yes, I did. Because he recognized the fabric. And I said, I make almost everything. And he said, then you're the one we need, one that knows how. Then after 3.5 years there, which was really wonderful, and Glenda and Kenneth and the children were there, and we could see them often. Then he had an offer to go to Scottsville, just out of Marshall, and almost double his salary, and he just couldn't say no, so we moved. And I went to work. I was just transferred to the penny store there. And we were there about 3.5 years when a freeze came and killed the department he worked in at the nursery. So we went to Houston to find a place. They wanted him to go to Friends and come back in a couple of years. Well, going back is not easy. So we stayed in Houston 7.5 years. And his mother became ill and didn't want to stay away from home anymore. So we went back to LaRue and rebuilt the house. He had a job at the on the grounds here in Athens at the college, and I had transferred to J.C. Penney's again. And I think that we enjoyed living back at LaRue, being able to be back with friends that we'd had years ago. And then he became ill and could not work anymore, had 2 or 3 heart attacks, and passed away in 1974. And I remained there for some years, about 8 years. Well, as I've said before, I always loved flowers, and when Reba and I were married, we were quite young. We had very little money. We didn't buy flowers. But come January, it was real cold and bad, and his uncle came by and asked him to help gather cattle. And so in early February, they went out to gather them. And as they came in, they passed the little lake, and he saw the water lilies blooming way out in the lake. So even though it was February, he just took off his clothes and swam out there and cut those and brought them home and asked me to go do something in another room. And he put them in a vase and put them in the center of the table for me. Then, years later, when we were living down where he worked in A&M, then he always had to clear after they decorated for events. at A&M. He had to clear those out and get them out of there. And it was Christmas time. And I really didn't like that old chimney that was in our apartment we rented. It was worn and ugly. When I came in from work that day, he had brought red and white poinsettias and built a Christmas tree over that fireplace and chimney effect. And he put the white ones, he made a red tree and put white ones out on the edge all the way to make it look like a candle on the limbs. I was never more surprised or pleased. Then, after we'd been down there about 2 years, he was doing the same thing at the close of school, and they had orchids galore. And as he cleared those out, he just picked up a wash tub and filled it full of orchids and brought it home to me. A whole tub full of orchids. So we had dishes, vases, everything I had orchids in it. And I said, how about our neighbor? Let's share some with her. She was an older lady. So he took a bucket full out to her, and she was just excited to death. And she spent quite a bit of time arranging a great corsage, a great sized one, so she could go to church next morning and show all her friends about the gift that her neighbor gave her, all these orchids. And she enjoyed the bragging and showing off as much as I enjoyed mine. The night before Reba died, we were talking. I had a cot in his room at the hospital, and he was doing quite well. But he talked to me a great deal about the past and how he hated to leave some things unfinished that we had begun, because we'd purchased the other children's part of the farm and hadn't yet paid for it. And I decided that it would, somehow I could do it. So I assured him that I would not lose it, that I would be able to take care of that. And I worked and was fortunate to lease some minerals for on other properties I had an interest in, and therefore I could keep the farm. And after I was, I think it was 1996, I was moving down to Sealy to live near my older daughter, because the younger one was a minister's wife and they moved around. Well, while doing that, I decided it was time to give them the farm. I didn't need to take care of it anymore. So that's exactly what I did. And Merrill and Nolan came back and built their retirement home there, which they and their families are enjoying. Glenda's children and grandchildren were able to go there often and enjoy, but they lived too far away to spend much time there. Anyway, I just wanted the farm to stay in the family, and I didn't need to do all the work it took to keep it leased and repaired and such, so I let